Bonjour mes amis, and welcome to Simply History. Today we journey through one of the most tumultuous periods in European history, the Napoleonic Wars. From the ashes of the French Revolution, a young Corsican general, Napoleon Bonaparte, rose to prominence, captivating a nation with his charisma and military genius. His ambition knew no bounds, his hunger for power insatiable. This, my friends, is the story of his meteoric rise and his dramatic fall, a story of epic battles, grand alliances, and crushing defeats. The Treaty of Amiens, signed in 1802, promised a fragile peace in Europe. But the embers of conflict still smoldered, waiting for the right gust of wind to reignite the flames of war. Napoleon, now Emperor of the French, yearned for more than just peace. He craved dominance, a Europe united under his banner. His ambition, however, threatened the delicate balance of power, alarming old enemies and sowing seeds of suspicion. Britain, ever wary of French ambitions across the Channel, watched Napoleon's growing power with increasing trepidation. Austria and Russia, their own interests threatened, prepared for the inevitable confrontation. The stage was set, the actors in their places. The war of the Third Coalition was about to begin. The fate of empires often hinges on single decisive moments. In October 1805, off the coast of Spain, one such moment arrived. The Battle of Trafalgar. Admiral Nelson, Britain's most celebrated naval hero, faced off against the combined might of the Franco-Spanish fleet. The stakes could not have been higher. Control of the seas, and with it, the fate of Europe, hung in the balance. The battle raged for hours, a maelstrom of cannon fire, splintering wood, and desperate courage. Nelson, a brilliant tactician, led his fleet with unmatched skill, ultimately securing a decisive victory for Britain. But victory came at a heavy price. Nelson, struck down by a French musket ball, breathed his last aboard his flagship, HMS Victory. His legend, however, would live on, forever etched in the annals of British naval history. With British naval dominance secured at Trafalgar, Napoleon turned his attention eastward, where Austria and Russia posed a formidable threat to his continental ambitions. In December 1805, near the Moravian town of Austerlitz, the Grande Armée, led by Napoleon himself, clashed with the combined forces of Austria and Russia. The Battle of Austerlitz would become a testament to Napoleon's military genius. Utilizing cunning strategy and exploiting his enemies' weaknesses, Napoleon outmaneuvered and outfought his adversaries, inflicting a crushing defeat upon them. The Battle of Austerlitz, often hailed as Napoleon's greatest victory, cemented his reputation as the most formidable military commander in Europe. Austria, humbled and defeated, was forced to sign the Treaty of Pressburg, ceding significant territory to France and acknowledging Napoleon's growing influence. The balance of power in Europe had shifted decisively in Napoleon's favor. The year is 1806. Napoleon's star continues to rise, his grip on Europe tightening with each passing season. But his relentless pursuit of power has not gone unnoticed. Prussia, once a formidable military power, observes Napoleon's expansion with growing alarm. The humiliation of Austria at Austerlitz serves as a stark warning. The Prussians, fearing for their own security and independence, begin to mobilize for war. Joining forces with Russia and Sweden, Prussia forms the Fourth Coalition, determined to challenge French hegemony and restore the balance of power in Europe. The stage is set for another epic confrontation, a clash of ideologies and ambitions. This time, however, Napoleon will face an enemy eager to prove its mettle on the battlefield. In October 1806, near the twin towns of Jena and Auerstedt in present-day Germany, the Prussian and French armies collided in a battle that would seal the fate of Prussia. The battle was fierce, and the stakes were high. The Battle of Jena-Auerstedt, a testament to the speed and efficiency of Napoleon's Grande Armée, would prove to be a disaster for Prussia. Every decision mattered, and every move was critical. Napoleon, employing his signature blend of strategic brilliance and tactical flexibility, outmaneuvered and overwhelmed the Prussian forces. Prussian armies, once renowned for their discipline and military prowess, crumbled under the relentless assault of the French. In a single day, the might of Prussia was shattered, its armies routed, its pride humbled. The road to Berlin lay open, and Napoleon, ever the opportunist, marched his victorious army into the heart of Prussia. With the fall of Berlin, Prussia's fate hung precariously in the balance. Tsar Alexander I of Russia, despite suffering setbacks, remained determined to resist Napoleon's ambitions. In July 1807, on a raft moored in the middle of the Neman River, Napoleon met with Tsar Alexander to negotiate a peace. The Treaty of Tilsit, a testament to Napoleon's diplomatic skills, would redraw the map of Europe. Prussia, stripped of half its territory and forced to pay heavy indemnities, was reduced to a shadow of its former self. Napoleon, at the height of his power, had effectively neutralized his enemies and established French dominance over much of Europe. The Treaty of Tilsit, however, proved to be a double-edged sword. While it brought temporary peace, it also sowed the seeds of resentment and mistrust, particularly in Russia, setting the stage for future conflicts. Napoleon, master of the battlefield, conqueror of much of Europe, but even he wasn't invincible. The Iberian Peninsula, home to Spain and Portugal, would become a thorn in his side, a quagmire that drained French resources and tested Napoleon's patience like few other campaigns. It all began with a cunning bit of deception. Napoleon, under the pretense of securing Portugal, marched his armies into Spain. He placed his brother Joseph on the Spanish throne, much to the fury of the Spanish people. This wasn't a mere changing of the guard, this was an invasion. The Spanish, proud and defiant, rose up in arms. From the bustling cities to the rugged mountains, a guerrilla war erupted. These weren't the neatly lined up armies Napoleon was used to facing. These were fighters who knew every inch of their land, who could disappear into the hills as quickly as they emerged. And then came the British, ever vigilant, ever opportunistic. Under the command of a rising star, Arthur Wellesley, later known as the Duke of Wellington, the British landed in Portugal, adding fuel to the fire and turning the Iberian Peninsula into a major theater of the Napoleonic Wars. The Spanish resistance wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a force to be reckoned with. The Battle of Bailén in 1808 sent shockwaves through Napoleon's empire. A French army defeated not by another grand army, but by a popular uprising. It was a blow to French prestige, a sign that Napoleon's grip on Europe wasn't as firm as it seemed. The city of Saragossa became a symbol of Spanish defiance. Under siege by the French, the citizens of Saragossa fought street by street, house by house. Women and children joined the fight, hurling stones and boiling oil from rooftops. The French eventually took the city, but at a terrible cost. Saragossa became a rallying cry for resistance across Spain and Europe. But the Peninsular War wasn't just about grand battles and sieges, it was a war of attrition. The Spanish guerrillas, masters of hit-and-run tactics, bled the French dry. Supply lines were disrupted, messengers ambushed, isolated outposts attacked. This was a new kind of warfare, one that Napoleon struggled to counter. The British, under Wellington's steady hand, provided a professional backbone to the Spanish resistance. Wellington, a master of logistics and battlefield tactics, slowly but surely pushed the French back, his victories at Talavera, Salamanca, and Vitoria marking the turning tide of the war. By 1814, after 6 long years of bloody conflict, the French were driven out of Spain. The Iberian Peninsula, once a symbol of Napoleon's ambition, became a testament to the power of national resistance and the limits of imperial overreach. The Peninsular War was a costly victory for all involved. Spain lay in ruins, its economy shattered, its people scarred by years of conflict. The French, though ultimately victorious in other theaters, had been bled white, their armies depleted, their resources stretched thin. Perhaps the most significant consequence of the Peninsular War was its impact on Napoleon's strategic thinking. Tied down in Spain, Napoleon was forced to divert precious resources and manpower away from other campaigns, most notably his upcoming invasion of Russia. (1812). Napoleon, at the height of his power, stood poised to launch his most ambitious campaign yet, the invasion of Russia. His grand army, a force of unprecedented size and might, assembled on the Russian border, a vast ocean of men and horses stretching as far as the eye could see. This wasn't just about territorial conquest. It was about breaking Russia's defiance of Napoleon's continental system, a blockade designed to cripple Britain's economy. Tsar Alexander I, unwilling to be bullied, had refused to comply, much to Napoleon's fury. The invasion began in June, the summer sun beating down on the marching columns. The sheer scale of the operation was astounding. Over 600,000 men, speaking a dozen different languages, marched eastwards, their destination Moscow, the heart of Russia. But Napoleon, for all his genius, had made a grave miscalculation. He had underestimated the vastness of Russia, the harshness of its climate, and the resilience of its people. He was walking into a trap that would shatter his empire and change the course of history. The Russians, under the command of General Barclay de Tolly, and later Mikhail Kutuzov, adopted a strategy of retreat and attrition. They would avoid major confrontations, drawing the French deeper and deeper into the vast Russian interior. As Napoleon advanced, he found himself facing a new and terrifying enemy, the Russian winter. The temperature plummeted, icy winds howled across the steppes, and snow fell in blinding blizzards. The French, ill-equipped for such conditions, began to suffer terribly from the cold. The Russian strategy of scorched earth compounded the French misery. Villages were emptied and burned, crops destroyed, wells poisoned. The French, already short on supplies, were reduced to scavenging for scraps. Starvation and disease stalked the ranks, claiming more lives than any battle. The Battle of Borodino, fought on the 7th of September 1812, was a Pyrrhic victory for Napoleon. Both sides suffered horrendous casualties, but the Russians, despite retreating, had inflicted a severe blow to the already weakened Grand Army. Napoleon finally reached Moscow in mid-September, but his triumph was short-lived. The city was largely deserted, and fires, some deliberately lit by the Russians, raged out of control. With winter approaching and his army a shadow of its former self, Napoleon had no choice but to order a retreat. The retreat from Moscow was a nightmare of epic proportions. Hounded by Cossacks, plagued by hunger and disease, and facing temperatures that could freeze a man solid in hours, the Grand Army disintegrated. Thousands upon thousands perished, their bodies left to rot in the snow. The once mighty Grand Army was reduced to a straggling, starving rabble. Napoleon himself narrowly escaped capture, his legend of invincibility shattered. The invasion of Russia had been a catastrophe for Napoleon. He had lost hundreds of thousands of men, his reputation lay in tatters, and across Europe, his enemies, sensing weakness, prepared to strike. The tide had turned, and the Napoleonic Empire, built on conquest and ambition, began its inexorable slide towards defeat. Napoleon, having retreated from Russia, was greatly weakened. This was the moment his enemies had been waiting for. All across Europe, old enemies sensed blood in the water. Austria, Prussia, Russia, and Great Britain, these old foes, put aside their differences and formed the Sixth Coalition. Their aim was simple: to remove Napoleon from power once and for all. The combined might of the Sixth Coalition was formidable. They had learned from their past encounters with Napoleon. They wouldn't underestimate him again. This time they were prepared for his military genius and the vast armies he could raise. The stage was set for a showdown that would decide the fate of Europe. The defining clash of this new war came in October 1813, near the German city of Leipzig. It was a battle of unprecedented scale and ferocity, earning it the name the Battle of Nations. Over 500,000 soldiers from across Europe clashed in a maelstrom of fire and steel. The fate of empires hung in the balance as Napoleon's forces fought with the courage and tenacity that had once brought them victory after victory. But the sheer weight of numbers, combined with the strategic brilliance of the coalition commanders, began to turn the tide. Despite moments of his old tactical genius, Napoleon was fighting a losing battle. After days of brutal fighting, with casualties mounting on both sides, Napoleon's forces were finally broken. The French defeat at Leipzig marked a turning point, signaling the beginning of the end for Napoleon's empire. Defeated but not yet broken, Napoleon retreated back to France. But the writing was on the wall. The Allies pursued him relentlessly, their armies marching triumphantly into Paris in the spring of 1814. With his empire crumbling, Napoleon had few options left. He abdicated his throne and was exiled to the tiny island of Elba, off the coast of Italy. It must have seemed a humiliating end for a man who had once ruled most of Europe, but Napoleon was not a man easily subdued. As the Allies met in Vienna to redraw the map of Europe, he was already plotting his return. The story of Napoleon Bonaparte was far from over. In February 1815, Napoleon escaped from Elba, landing back on French soil with just a handful of loyal soldiers. News of his return spread like wildfire, igniting excitement and apprehension across Europe. The French people, weary of the restored monarchy and yearning for the glories of the empire, welcomed him back with open arms. Napoleon marched on Paris, gathering support as he went, and within weeks, he was once again Emperor of the French. The Allies, meeting in Vienna, were stunned by Napoleon's audacious return. They immediately declared him an outlaw and prepared for war, vowing to crush his rebellion and secure lasting peace in Europe. The stage was set for one final desperate gamble. Napoleon, facing the combined might of Britain, Prussia, and their allies, knew that this was his last chance for glory or oblivion. Napoleon, with his back against the wall, knew he had to act decisively. He raised a new army, drawing on the deep well of French patriotism and his own legendary charisma. His plan was audacious: to strike quickly at the Allied armies in Belgium, before they could fully unite their forces. He aimed to drive a wedge between the British, led by the Duke of Wellington, and the Prussians, commanded by the veteran Gebhard Leberecht von Blücher. Napoleon's initial moves were swift and successful. He crossed into Belgium and engaged Prussian forces at Ligny on June 16, 1815, winning a tactical victory that forced the Prussians to retreat. However, the victory came at a cost. The Prussians, though defeated, were not destroyed, and Wellington's British army now stood between Napoleon and his ultimate goal of Brussels. On June 18, 1815, near the small Belgian village of Waterloo, the fate of Europe and Napoleon Bonaparte was decided. The French army, under a leaden sky, faced Wellington's Anglo-Allied forces deployed across a ridge. The Battle of Waterloo was a brutal, close-fought affair. Cannon fire tore through the ranks, cavalry charges clashed with thunderous force, and infantry squares stood firm against relentless attacks. Napoleon's hopes rested on breaking the British lines before Prussian reinforcements could arrive. But Wellington's men held firm, their red lines repelling attack after attack. And then, late in the day, as the French committed their last reserves, the Prussians arrived, their presence turning the tide of battle decisively. Napoleon's army, exhausted and outnumbered, finally broke. The defeat at Waterloo marked the end of the Napoleonic Wars and the final curtain on the Emperor's extraordinary career. Napoleon, defeated and abandoned by his remaining followers, surrendered to the British. He was exiled to the remote island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic, a world away from the battlefields and palaces of Europe. On St. Helena, Napoleon spent his final years in enforced isolation, dictating his memoirs and reflecting on his extraordinary life. He railed against his captors, portraying himself as a martyr to British ambition, but his words rang hollow in the ears of a Europe weary of war. On May 5, 1821, at the age of 51, Napoleon Bonaparte died on that windswept island. The cause of death remains a subject of debate. Some have said it was stomach cancer, others support the theory of a bleeding stomach ulcer. But what is certain is that the world mourned the passing of one of the most extraordinary figures in history. Napoleon Bonaparte remains one of history's most fascinating and controversial figures. To some, he was a visionary leader, a military genius who spread the ideals of the French Revolution across Europe. To others, he was a tyrant, a power-hungry dictator who sacrificed countless lives in his quest for glory. His legacy is a complex tapestry of triumph and tragedy, of brilliance and brutality. What is certain is that Napoleon's impact on the course of history cannot be overstated. His wars, his reforms, and his very personality left an enduring legacy that continues to fascinate and inspire debate even today. Thank you for joining me on this epic journey through the Napoleonic Wars. I hope you found it as fascinating as I did. Please remember to like and subscribe for more exciting history content. Keep exploring the past here in Simply History. Until next time.